Okay, so I'm going to talk about biodegradability, compostability, and non-persistence. Everybody talks persistence. It's a terrible word, right? You're already sending the wrong message if you say we are persistent and look, we are measuring it, look, it's not. So we have a standard now under development where we are talking about estimating time of these for being non-persistent. So just a word thing for you all to think about. I'm going to start with what is a biodegradable compostable polymer. And if you have forgotten your chemistry or your science, I promise you, you will learn it now, right? So if you forgot to turn in that homework, well, right, the timing is there right now. So the key there, which we seem to miss, is that we are asking the question, can microorganisms in the disposal environment, whether it is composting or soil, completely utilize the carbon substrate, at the source? In what time frame? The time frame is in red because everything is biodegradable. And you have seen these knockouts out there even today who claim they have some magic dust which they can throw into any polyethylene and make it biodegradable. Probably can make it biodegradable, but it's a question of time. And what I wanted to share with you is this basic thing which we need to communicate even today as to what do we mean by the term biodegradable and what you are expecting out of that. And so if you have a polymer molecule, which is basically a carbon-centric long chain, and you expose it to the environment, whether it is a soil environment, a compost environment, there are chemical and biological ways in which it can break down. I know I met somebody who is a chemist, so hydrolytic breakdown or oxidative breakdown or enzymatic breakdown, and it will form fragments, which you see there. Some may even cross-link. And this is always being presented as it's biodegradable. Even today, a Bloomberg reporter called me and said, there is this company, Waste Plastic or something like that, who claim they have an enzyme that will break polyethylene and polypropylene down. So that is where the state is in terms of when people talk about biodegradability. But what you need to communicate is that these fragments have to be completely utilized or assimilated by microbes in that disposal environment. This is a key factor. And that it is not just the microbes, it is also the temperature. Temperature is going to be a major player. Environment, of course, but typically most microorganisms present in soil, present in compost, present in aquatic systems, we have done a metagenomic analysis, taken out, extracted the DNA and tried to find out what they are. They're not much different. They're there in enough quantities that they will be able to break down polymers. But it's the temperature. And if you're a chemical engineer, you know that the rate of a reaction is directly dependent on temperature. So lower the temperature, lower is the rate. So that endpoint, which is the conversion of the polymer carbon to CO2 by microbial metabolism. So the key phrase which we cannot afford to not say is the word microbial conversion. So the conversion is microbial. That is the key we need to emphasize. That 90% plus of the polymer carbon must be microbially converted to CO2 when we say or talk about biodegradability. We don't do that. Even people in this room Never say that. Never use the word 90% plus. I have posted many times in LinkedIn. My first phrase is 90%. You have to put that up there. Because everybody is afraid that maybe they're only at 70% or 60. 90% relative to cellulose is achievable. Today you have products there. So this is something which I want to make sure you capture. And then there is a qualifier to it. You got in 180 days, which is the time for compost, 2 years, and then that qualifier is based on ASTM standards. Of course, we are in US, so I say ASTM. You can put ASTM/ISO standards. You're perfectly fine. But if somebody asks the question, what do you mean by biodegradable? That red line statement has got to be there. Because even people working in the field of biodegradability, my colleagues who work with, say, polyurethanes, have asked me, why do you have 90%? Why don't we make it 60%, 50%? I tell them, why don't you make it 0%? It's much easier then. We don't have to worry about it at all. So what I am saying is this is a very high bar. But unless you get into the business of getting your product accepted without problems, you need to stick to this. You win this battle, then you can lower it, then you can think of other things. But if you don't do this, we have a long hill to climb. Now, I want to talk about biodegradability. I promised you a chemistry lesson. It's very important to understand what do we mean by microorganisms utilize carbon or convert carbon. Very important to understand. And if there's anything I can give back to this group is this slide, this thing. Feel free to take it. You know, I've been saying this so many times that it's probably in every presentation of mine. The first take-home message, microorganisms utilize carbon not to clean up the environment for you. They use it to extract energy. It is a food for them to multiply and grow, right? Point 2, they do it by transporting that carbon molecule inside the cell. And that's a key. So if you have a large polymer molecule, it's not going to magically go inside. It has to break down. That breakdown can be abiotic, hydrolytic, oxidative, whatever, but it has to be small enough to be able to go inside the cell. Even cellulose doesn't go directly inside the cell. Enzymes are secreted which break it down to smaller fragments, to then dextrose, to glucose, which then goes inside the cell. So breakdown into smaller molecules is necessary for entry into the cell, and therein lies this issue of microplastics and microparticles, because everybody is expecting, and some of you may even be hypothesizing, that I have this long polymer chain and magically it is gone. It doesn't. It will form smaller and smaller particles, whatever way you want to look at it. But if it does not, it's not going to biodegrade. So this magic illusion that somehow you say no microplastics formed, or no microplastics acceptable, no microparticles not acceptable. And so you need to explain it correctly that these will break down to smaller particles, which increases surface area, which then goes inside the polymer and then is converted. So that is very important to communicate. Of course, this is basic 101 biology, right? Under conditions, the carbon is biologically oxidized to CO2, releasing energy that is used for its life process. It's like we eat food, we ate food today, we seem more energetic. Although it seems like I am the one more energetic than you guys are. But still, nevertheless, that's what you're doing. And this is the basis which I am trying to get to, which somehow, if captured correctly and communicated and articulated correctly, is the essence of the answer for this microplastics issue or microparticles issue. That when we say that this is biodegradable. We are saying 90% plus of the polymer carbon is microbially converted to CO2. Look at what do we mean by that. We mean that that molecule has gone inside the cell. It is biologically oxidized to CO2. That releases energy. You see, for those of you who are chemical engineers, 686 kilocalories or more. When you do it anaerobically, it is about 47 kilocalories per mole of energy. That energy is harnessed in a ATP, ADP process for the growth of the microorganisms. Where is that microstat? It's not hanging there. It is inside. It is taking place. And that whole process, you must have studied this as Krebs cycle, or at least you can go back and look at your kids' biology high school book. I bet you it is there. This, what I am telling you, is in the biology textbooks at the 10th and 12th grades, right? That this is the Krebs cycle. This is how microbes get energy, fuel for their life processes. This is the ATP cycle, the Krebs cycle, whatever you want to call it, but it's a complex mechanism. All these three things work together to be used, and then CO2 is released. And this is how nature functions. This is how the natural microbial populations exist and go. We need to explain this. Maybe you guys have a better way to do it, nice pictures, Pac-Man capturing things like that. I don't have it. I have a bunch of equations which nobody, even today my students glaze over that. Oh shoot, this is, can't balance it stoichiometrically and so on and so forth. So maybe some of you can take this concept and explain it to the lay public, that when we say biodegradability, we're saying that, look, I've taken this polymer molecule, it's broken down to small particles. Those particles go inside the cell, and look how wonderful things happen. It utilizes it. It converts it to energy. Just like you eat food, the food is digested. It's converted to energy, the same process which you're talking about happens there. And that is the message we need to communicate, right? And therefore, this is a test method. I'm sure I saw Sam in the audience there. He'll talk about this tomorrow. But this test is such a simple thing. Why do we ever complicate it? I never understood. You have a flask. You don't put ocean water, put compost, put soil, doesn't matter. There are teeming with microbes. You don't even have to put microbes there, right? Then don't give that matrix any other food except your test carbon food. Close up everything. If the microbes are capable of utilizing it, we saw the equations and how it happens, it's going to convert it to CO2. And you measure how much of your test carbon has gone to CO2, that's your percent biodegradability. And we have been saying that since 1990. And I've been showing this slide since 2000. All right. But the beauty is that the 90%, that is the key. And if you look at all the standards, you look at all the standards listed there, they're all based on the same principle. Not one of them is different. That is the beauty of this industry, that they don't have to fight. Oh, not my standard, not your standard. Oh, they're asking 60. No, I'm asking. It's beautifully harmonized across the world. India has got the same standards as what we have here, as what is there in Europe. How can we not succeed in this? But the way we need to convey is that this is 90% plus polymer carbon microbially metabolized to CO2, taking place inside the cell, making use of the microbial machinery to do that. We don't do it. Microbes do our work for us. That needs to be communicated and articulated, and therefore there are no particles left. There are only microbes which are there. This 90% plus, I know Rhodes is in the audience. I remember him saying, why in the world did you ever come up with 90%? Why can't we say 100%? Because there is something, the science in us tells us, we need to be honest and transparent. So the 90% plus has got multiple rationales. And one of the things I was asked to do is tell why we picked 90% plus. One, this is biology. And if you have ever run these experiments, the error bars are not plus or minus 1%. They can be plus or minus 10%, okay? So the values of percent biodegradability is going to fluctuate. So when you set a plateau, a level, which is not 90% plus or minus 10%, it is an absolute value, then statistics teaches us that if you set it at 100, you'll have to run probably 100 experiments to reach that, which means how much dollars? I'm sure OWS would be very happy with that kind of... But what I am saying is the 90% is for a statistical way in which we can reach that plateau, and because of the biology. So statistics plus biology is what set it up at 90%. I know you guys and some of them say, oh, it goes into microbial biomass. I don't buy that because there is not much microbial biomass, because that's what we're asking for, okay? So 90% plus, everybody should be very clear on what they say. Don't dim it, don't dumb it down, don't say, oh, but it's really 100%. People will not believe it. Tell them the way it is. And if you want, you can run statistics. You say, I'm running at 5 miles per hour. Let's say one day you ran at 4, one day you ran at 8. How many times will you have to run to reach 5 and above? You yourself can find out statistically it's going to take a lot of runs before you reach that. Explain that. It's not that complicated, right? So that's the messaging which I have for you there. Okay. Should never give a professor a podium to talk, especially. Okay. So that's about biodegradability and the messaging which I think needs to go with it. I got a messaging for you with composting, because this, and I think there are a lot of composters in this room. So for me, composting is simply a waste management process, a managed process where we are leveraging mesophilic and thermophilic bacteria. So if you look at this growth curve against temperature, you see the composting regime. You have mesophiles, thermophiles, and you see the temperatures. The way the system is set up, when you do composting, when microbes utilize carbon, the temperature has to go up. You eat food, your temperature has gone up. You know that. How come then that we are forcing the microbes into a cold room at 25 or whatever and saying, now do the job? You need to let the microbes work naturally. Isn't that what we're talking about? That's what that is about, right? Cut me off whenever you are. 2 slides and I'll stop, right? So here is my education slide for you. My understanding of composting, and maybe we'll have good discussions afterwards on this, is you have organic material, you give it nutrients, microorganisms, air, and you feed it compostable plastics, and there is biodegradation. I submit to you, this is not composting. This is biodegradation. So where in the world does composting come from? I will submit to you, and this is not in any textbook yet, but the dead microorganisms, which are, and the lignin products, which break down, will undergo reactions to give you compost. I'll show you the chemistry in 1 minute. That's my last slide. But, promise you. But I need to separate composting in terms of what does the biodegradable product do. It is simply a food fuel for the microorganisms to multiply and grow. I'll give you a very simple example. If you just took food waste, which has a carbon-nitrogen ratio of 15 to 17, and try to do composting, you will get bug slime and it will be smelly and it will be useless. You need to add browns. What is that? That's carbon. And I'm submitting to you that compostable plastics is the best carbon-rich source for you to feed. We know its mechanism, we know it biodegrades, so why don't we present compostable plastics going into the composting as a fuel to drive composting and not just as an add-on. And there are people who say, oh, but it doesn't go into compost. We are not generating compost. We are generating the energy for microbes to multiply and grow, and we ensure that it is all captured. If that happens, then I submit to you, this is all natural. Your California law, SB 54, says only natural products should be used in composting. That's exactly what you're doing. All your products, whether it's a carbohydrate polymer, which is your food waste, or your compostable polymer, which is the equivalent of a carbohydrate polymer, is utilized by the microbes, multiply and grow, and they are not there anymore, because your ASTM tests show you that. And it is only that microbial biomass that reacts to give you that product. And I put my thing down. This is the chemistry. I want to tell you that composting is not connected to biodegradation. That if you look at it, compostable polymers feed into the microbial populations. It is simply an energy source. After a lot of growth, the cure time, the cure phase, there is no more carbon available, the microbes go dormant, they die. That dead microorganisms react with lignin, and you see that chemistry which I just outlined. This is called humic acid, humin, fulvilin. You have heard these terms. So humic substances are formed not by biology, it's formed by chemistry. But nobody would want to say that because the word chemistry is not a good thing to say these days. The word chemical is not. They are all chemicals. And it is the humic substances are produced by that reaction. And what we are trying to prove in our lab, just like I talked about in 1990, we are taking lignins and we are taking microbes and trying to generate those humic substances and using NMR to correlate it. We're trying to use labeled substrates to do that, right? And I will stop there.